guys, welcome to Viva Vegan. I am Molly Hernandez and today we are going to be making ravioli al uovo. Raviolo al uovo. Raviolo al uovo. Anyway, I am not Italian. It is basically a ricotta filled ravioli that has a raw egg yolk inside. So when you cut into it, the egg yolk runs out and it has a really nice texture that's going to turn into part of the sauce. However, we're doing this vegan style, so there is no egg yolk, and so we're going to be using butternut squash instead as the filling. That sounds crazy. I swear to you, it actually tastes like an egg yolk. So follow along with me. I'm going to show you how to make this classic Italian dish with a vegan brown butter sage sauce. I can't wait for you guys to try this. So we're going to start on the egg yolk part of our raviolos. So this is butternut squash that's all been diced to about the same size. For me, I bought store-bought butternut squash that was already diced for me. It makes it so much easier. If you don't have that option, you'll just peel and de-seed your butternut squash and dice it again to about the same size. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour a little bit of avocado oil over this. We're gonna mix that all in, and then we are going to throw that in the oven at 350 degrees until these are tender. They should be fork tender. It's probably gonna take about 20 minutes, maybe 30 depending on how big you've chopped up your butternut squash. So that's it. We just tossed in a little bit of avocado oil, oven at 350, and we'll check back in about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna start on our egg yolk for our raviolos. So my butternut squash has finished cooking in the oven. It cooked for, actually it was closer to about 30 minutes for me at 350 degrees. You're gonna wanna do this while these are still hot because this is gonna melt our vegan butter for our egg yolks. So I've measured out 1 cup of my butternut squash. And again, this is still hot. So I'm gonna pour that into the blender. I have 1/4 cup of my, a quarter cup of my vegan butter. I'm using Yolk's. I find it's like the most buttery taste. I really like this brand a lot. So I'm gonna do 1/4 cup. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's that fat that's really gonna give our egg yolk that egg yolk consistency and mouthfeel. And then I'm gonna do just enough of nut milk to get that going. We don't want this too runny, otherwise it's gonna spill all out when we go to add it to our raviolo filling. So we're gonna put that in the blender. If you're having a hard time getting it going, we're gonna add a little bit more of our nut milk. Just make sure whatever nut milk, you could do this with soy milk too. I'm using almond milk here. Just make sure whatever you're using is unsweetened. You do not want to be using a sweetened nut or soy milk for this recipe. Okay, so we're gonna do a taste test to see how it's tasting. Tasting good. So mine still has a little bit more lumps in it. I'm gonna continue blending that. I might add a tiny bit more butter. Make sure you're tasting your food. Stop serving your guests food that you haven't tasted yourself. So I'm gonna add a little bit more butter to this. I'm gonna add a little bit of sea salt to taste. Continue blending until it's perfectly smooth, and then we'll swing back around and do a check-in. Okay, so I've added probably another 1/4 cup of butter to this. I also added a teeny tiny more nut milk, and you can see that is really nice and smooth. I added a little bit of sea salt, and I'm really liking where it's at. It really actually tastes like an egg yolk. I know that sounds crazy because it's squash, but it really does. It's that fat from that butter that's giving it that really creamy egg yolk taste. Okay, so we're gonna continue with our ravioli. I have my pasta dough that has been sitting in the refrigerator for a minimum of 30 minutes. If you'd like the full tutorial on my basic pasta dough recipe, you can check the link below. I also have here my ricotta, which is gonna be part of the filling, as well as the vegan egg yolk filling that we have made. I have my pasta roller, I have a rolling pin, I have some cookie cutters, some various teaspoons and tablespoons. I have a sheet pan that's covered with a kitchen towel with some flour that's dusted over the top. And then I also have some all-purpose flour for dusting. So first off, we are going to take our dough. I've cut it into quarters, and I'm going to take one of the quarters of my dough so it's easy to work with. And I'm going to start shaping it into more of a rectangular shape. This is going to help us as we form our raviolis so that the dough is a little bit more uniform in shape and we're not working with one end that's so much of a different shape than the other end. So that way when we fold it over, we have a nice uniform shape. So I'm just dusting my cutting board as well as my dough, and we're going to start rolling this out. We need this thin enough so that it can start going through the pasta maker. So it doesn't need to be super thin, just thin enough for the pasta maker to do the rest of the work for us. Okay, so we have it about that thin. And I'm going to start on the widest setting of my pasta maker. And for me, this is a 7. So I'm going to start rolling it through, and I'm going to start on the 7 and do that twice before I start moving down. With the ravioli, it's gonna hold a filling, obviously, in case you've never had ravioli. So I'm only gonna roll this down to a 3 because it is holding a filling. I don't want the dough to get super thin and like paper thin, and then when we go to cook it, we're worried about the pasta tearing and the filling spilling out. That's not what we want. So I'm only gonna roll it down to a 3 so that it's a little bit more robust. So what I'm going to do next, I've rolled it out once at a 7. I'm going to fold the edges in to meet, like so. And then I'm going to fold that in half. So now we have a nice square shape that we're working with. We're going to roll this out and then run it back through our pasta maker. So this will give us really nice square edges so that we are maximizing our dough. And if your dough starts to stick a little bit, just dust it with flour as needed. Again, I'm using all-purpose flour for dusting. Down to a 3, and I'm just going to roll it one more time through the 3. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to dust our cutting board one more time with some flour, and we're going to lay out our pasta. So these are going to be fairly large. We're calling them raviolos. We're only serving one, and they're larger than our traditional ravioli. When I serve this, I really only give one per person. So we're going to measure this into about half. I'm just going to kind of pinch that there so I can see my marker of where my halfway point is. And I'm going to start filling these. So what I'm going to do is I like to take my cookie cutters and kind of measure out how many I can get. If you don't have cookie cutters, that's okay. You can just put the filling directly on and cut it into squares. That works as well. But I like to just kind of like measure out and see approximately how many I can get with this. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. I have 4, and I'm going to next grab my ricotta, and I'm going to put in about a tablespoon into each. So you want it to be about a quarter to a half inch away from the edge of the ravioli shape. And I'm just going to continue working these. try not to let it get all the way to the end. It's gonna make it hard for us to seal them if you have any of your filling that comes all the way to the end. Okay, so next I'm gonna take my measuring spoons, and I'm gonna use my 1/2 teaspoon and make an indent into that ricotta. And the way I'm doing this is I'm pressing it down and up. So I'm pressing it down and scooping it out. So down and out, down and out, down and out, down and out. So you have this nice little well there, which is where our egg yolk is gonna go. So I'm now gonna take my egg yolk, and you can see this is firmed up a little bit from what we put it, or from how we put it in the refrigerator. It's because that butter that's in there has started to harden again. So I'm going to fill those little wells with my vegan egg yolk. And then I am going to take just a little bit of water and dip my finger in it and rub it around right where the edge of these raviolis are. And the water is gonna help seal the dough together. Think of it like your glue to your pasta dough. So as these cook, that butter is gonna melt again in that vegan egg yolk, so they will end up being a little bit more runny than this. They're not gonna be as runny as a normal egg yolk that you cut into, where you get that beautiful pour out that becomes part of the sauce. You're not gonna get that with this, but some of that butter will melt a little bit more, so it will be a little bit more liquefied. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to fold this over. And we're not going to press down yet. We're just gonna try and beautifully drape these as carefully as possible over our raviolos. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next is I'm going to take one of my smaller cookie cutters, and I'm just going to try and get all that filling in there, just to shape it a little bit more. This is more for aesthetics. You could do this too with like a champagne flute or something like that. Okay, so next we are going to start sealing these and trying to get as much of the air out as possible. So I'm gonna work from the end to end. I'm not gonna start in the middle and work my way out. I'm gonna do one end to the other. So I'm just gonna try and, with my fingers, press out any extra air that could be in there. And then I'm just gonna try and press down around where that water was. And I like to leave a little bit of an opening on the ends here for that air to escape. So now that those have been shaped, I'm going to take my cutter and I'm going to press really firmly and turn. So when I do that, it's not only going to cut them, but it's going to help seal those ends of the ravioli together between the two sheets, so that it will hopefully prevent them from splitting apart and opening into our pasta water. That's like the worst feeling in the world when you go to put them in your water and you see the filling running out. So I'm pressing and I'm turning. And then what we're gonna do next is we're going to just take it and pinch the ends together. So filling to dough ratio is very high in your filling and very little pasta dough. And I'm just gonna place those onto my rack. We could also use scalloped edge. Let's do one like that. And again, I'm just going to press and kind of seal the edges together. I don't want these opening when I go to cook them. And I'm just taking like the very, very edge of these and pinching together. If you go too far towards the middle where the filling is, you're gonna end up pushing the filling out, and it's gonna be hard to seal the dough together if you have any filling in between there. So I'm really just working with the very, very edge here, just like so. And we're gonna set it aside. And then what I can do here is I can re-roll out this pasta, let it sit covered for a few minutes, and then go back and roll that out so I'm not wasting anything. Okay, so if you do not have cookie cutters for your raviolis, I'm gonna show you how to do it without that. So I've rolled out my pasta sheet into a 3. I'm going to fold it in half and put a little crease just about my halfway point. And then I'm going to continue with my filling. I'm doing about a tablespoon here. And I'm doing these, I would say, about 2.5 inches apart. Again, these are pretty big. What I'm doing, I'm not doing small raviolis for this dish. I'm doing one big raviolo per person, so be pretty generous. Okay, then I am going to take my ½ teaspoon and go press down and up, down and up. So down and up. So I'm scooping a nice little well into these. And I'm not going all the way down to the bottom. I'm going just shy of where the filling meets the pasta dough. I'm going to fill these with my vegan egg yolk right into that well that we've just created. Okay, then I'm going to take my pasta, or my water, not my pasta water, and I'm going to just take my finger. You could also use a brush here if you wanted to. And I'm just wetting down the edges, and then I'm going to do the same thing in between each one here. Again, this is going to be your glue. Okay, then we are going to fold this over. And we are going to start pressing out the air. Once those are done, if for any reason you've already sealed off all the edges in your raviolos and you find that you have an air pocket somewhere, what you can do is you could take a skewer and just poke a little hole there to release the air bubble, and then just make sure you pinch that together so that the pasta stays together, and again, your filling doesn't come out as you're cooking it. So once again, if you don't have these cookie cutters, you could do this with a narrow glass. I'm just kind of shaping these so that they're more uniform and have more of a bulbous shape for the filling, so they look a little bit more professional. Okay, so from here what I'm gonna do, again, this is if you don't have your cookie cutters or if you want a square raviolo, is I'm gonna take my pizza cutter here. I'm going to make sure that all of my edges have been sealed, and I'm going to press firmly and push. And the reason we're pressing firmly is not only so it cuts, but also so that it seals. Okay, so I've separated those, and I'm gonna cut the edges off here so that it's nice and uniform. So once you've cut all of your raviolos, you're just gonna put them onto your sheet tray with your dish towel and some flour that's dusted on the bottom. And we're just gonna leave these out for about an hour to dry before we toss them in our water. Okay, so now that our raviolos have been shaped, we're going to cook them. So I have my pasta water going right here. It is salted, and I have a medium saute pan that I'm going to turn on high. So we're gonna do a browned butter type sauce for this. Now, if you've ever tried to make brown butter with a vegan butter, it does not work. And the reason for that is because when you use a traditional cow's milk butter, it's the milk solids that actually brown and burn that give you that toasted brown butter flavor. So we're gonna do a little trick to give us that nutty toasted flavor without using a cow's milk that has milk solids in it. So I'm gonna do a tablespoon of vegan butter. I'm using Miyokos. We're gonna put that in, and what I've done is I've taken hazelnuts and ground them up. And this is what's gonna give us our brown butter flavor. So I've just put these in the food processor and ground them up, and we're going to toast them in the butter, and that's gonna become our sauce, part of our sauce for our raviolos. So I'm gonna do these 1 to 2 at a time. Today I'm just gonna do 1 at a time so you can see it. So as that butter is melting, I wanna start toasting these hazelnuts so that they release their oils, they get fragrant, and they start to give off that really nutty, toasty flavor. Okay, so my butter is starting to melt and those nuts are starting to get toasted. My water is boiling. So I'm going to throw in one of my raviolos. Again, these have been out and drying for about an hour, just at room temperature, uncovered on a baking sheet. So I'm gonna drop these in the water 1 at a time, just because I'm only serving 1 at a time. So these are gonna cook very quickly. Fresh pasta only takes about 3 minutes to cook, and we'll know that it's done once it starts to float. So as you can see, the nuts are starting to get golden brown. That's exactly what we're looking for. We're now gonna add our sage to this. I'm just gonna do a pinch of sage. And we want that to get fragrant. Turn my heat on low. We don't want those hazelnuts to burn. It's gonna give our sauce a really bitter flavor, which is not what we want. So I have that heat on low just so it can stay warm. Once our ravioli is done, we're gonna pop it right into our sauce, saute it for a few minutes, and call it a day. So as you can see, it is floating, which means it's done. So that was ready very quickly. That's why you wanna make sure that you have your sauce ready to go. We're gonna pop that in. And we're just going to coat it in. I'm also going to take a tiny bit of my pasta water and add that in as well. And let's start basting. Flip it over. And that's it, and we will dump it right onto our plate. So I'm just putting it right onto my plate here, and I'm just going to top it with some of that beautiful brown butter. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today on Viva Vegan. I hope you guys really liked this dish. I'm just gonna show you one more time. I cannot wait to cut into this and start eating it myself. This is really a showstopper dish that your guests are gonna be really wowed by. This isn't something you're gonna be making every night of the week. It does take time, but it really gives that wow effect to your guests, and I promise they will love it. They might not even know it's vegan. I usually don't tell my guests that most of my dishes are vegan, even though they know I'm vegan. I don't like to tell them that. So please send me your recipe request for a dish that you would like me to turn into a vegan recipe. I can't wait to hear from you guys about what you thought about this dish. Thank you so much for joining me.